Hi, everyone. I am Kat Haas. I'm the director of the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor, and I'm glad to be here and talk to you about it. So the Monitor is this really cool resource that is basically a very collaborative research project that was started quite a few years ago. And the purpose of it is to track all of the rights of nature initiatives that have happened and are currently happening all around the world. And it began back in 2020, 2019, and it took a few years. And today it is up and it is live, and it is the most comprehensive resource we have out there that compiles all the initiatives that are happening around the world. So I'm going to share my screen with y'all so you can see it, and then I will talk to you about how to use the resource, how to move through it, and then answer some questions. Tosana, if you could allow me to share my screen, that would be great. Great. Can you all see this?
Yep.
Wonderful. So this is the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor. It's an interactive online platform that's completely open access, so anyone can use it. It tracks eco jurisprudence initiatives around the world. It compiles their legal documents and other resources, such as news articles, multimedia like videos, and other things that tell the stories behind initiatives, not just their legal documents. And you can explore these initiatives on this interactive map. And this is the main dashboard for the monitor. You can also look through these graphs, which answer various questions of interest. So the reason it's called the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor is because it doesn't exclusively track rights of nature. While that is by far the dominant category of initiatives, it tracks all sorts of ecological law initiatives that take a ecocentric view, an ecocentric worldview. So traditionally, there's been an anthropocentric, which means a human-centered view on law, and it focuses on the human. We're tracking laws that take an ecocentric view. That includes rights of nature, as well as ecocide law, as well as many indigenous models that reject this anthropocentric underpinning that has traditionally been existing in the Western legal governance systems. So therefore, it's called the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor, and we track multiple kinds of jurisprudence, which you can see here, and you can use as a filter on the map. So you can see that there are many rights of nature initiatives, but there are also other kinds of initiatives like eco-governance systems, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So as I said before, the monitor was created because the rapid growth in the number of these laws around the world has been massive. In the last 20 years, we've seen these laws explode everywhere, and that's really a challenge for people who want to learn about these initiatives, who want to perform research. So the Monitor project was created with that in mind, to compile all of these, find their legal documents, and put them in a central place where people can access them and begin to ask questions, begin to learn about the successes and the challenges of past initiatives and how we can move forward and do better, create new frameworks, things like that. So the tracker, this is the map, and it is updated on a rolling basis, and it's come out. So when the tracker was launched in 2022, it had about 400 initiatives. Today, in early 2024, it has around 500 plus initiatives. We add more every day, and The way that we identify them is through self-reporting. So when people and communities have a new initiative that they have put forth, we hope and encourage them to report that to us so we can include it in the tracker, as well as research performed by myself and some of my colleagues. And we will find these documents, find these legal initiatives, and we'll include them in the monitor. So it is updated almost on a daily basis. This is exciting. It means that there's a lot of movement and a lot of stuff happening with the monitor and with this legal movement. So there are a few ways that you can interact with the monitor. There is this tracker, and that is the interactive map, as I spoke to. Through that, you can use these filters to find the different types of jurisprudence that you are interested in. We can look at the rights of nature, and perhaps we are also interested in environmental personhood initiatives, and we can click these dots and see what each individual initiative is. If you click on a dot that has multiple, it will zoom you in further. We can go very deep. Ecuador has many initiatives. We can explore the dots, and you can also find one that is of interest, and you can learn more about the initiative. This is the individual page for every initiative. As I said, there's about 500 plus of them at this point. When you're here, it gives you some basic details about it, where it is, what its status is, who initiated it, what kind of legal provision it is. This is a declaration. It talks about what the ecological actor is. So that would be the ecosystem. Maybe that is nature as a whole, or maybe it's a specific river. In this case, it's a specific forest. It also will tell you who initiated it, as well as the types of these things. So the types allow us to do large scale research and tracking. This is a forest. It is promulgated by indigenous groups. And these allow us to create charts and graphs for people to use about the monitor. Every initiative will have a small summary attached to it, as well as its official legal document, as well as some additional resources, including web pages, multimedia, things like this. Then you can always return back to the tracker and explore that further. So that's one way that you can use the monitor. In addition, and to complement this, we have these charts that tell the overarching story, and you can access these through the dashboard, as well as going to printable charts, which allows you to view them in PDF forms. You can print them off, you can use them, download them to be used in presentations. We always encourage that. We just ask that you simply cite the monitor when you do so, but everything in the monitor is open source and it's meant to be used by individuals for learning and for research purposes. As well, you can download the entire data set of the monitor from this page, the data request page. You simply put in your name and your email, and you can receive the entire data set as an Excel file. And that allows you to do your own research, answer your own research questions, which is really exciting. And the purpose of this, we hope, is to encourage new research, encourage new frameworks, etc. You can find the most recent initiatives on the latest news page. It tells you the date, and we try to keep this as up to date as possible. This allows you to see what's happening in the moment. Recently, there has been a motion in the Netherlands, and very excitingly, the state of Mexico has approved a constitutional amendment on the rights of nature. And finally, one of the very useful ways to explore the monitor and its data is through the toolkit. The toolkit is basically the searchable database component. It complements the tracker. It has all the information that's on the interactive map, and it presents it in this searchable database system. So let's say that you are interested in looking at rights of rivers, and maybe if you are interested in starting your own new rights of nature initiative, this could be a way that you use the monitor to help you do so. So say you are looking to start a rights of rivers initiative in your local area. You could go here and through these filters, identify other previous initiatives that are similar to yours so that you could learn about how they started their initiative, what it looks like, what their successes are, and also identify people, organizations, allies to help broaden your coalition, maybe get in contact with them to learn what their process was and what was successful and what was a challenge. So you can select rights of nature, because that's the type of jurisprudence you're interested in. You can select freshwater ecosystems, because you're thinking about the rights of rivers. And maybe you are interested, we can just do this for now and see what it turns up. There are 73 results, and you can see that there's some are about watersheds, some are about the rights of rivers. Maybe you are interested in a local law. Maybe you want to do it locally. Maybe you want to do it, maybe it's going to be a citizen's declaration. So we can type in this. And we go through and we see all of the previous initiatives that are similar. You can explore them and sort of identify ones that are similar to yours. We have some of them, such as, let's find a good one for you. Here we go. We can do, we have the, we have some that have examples. They have templates for you to use. There is the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Rivers, for example. It is basically a template for how you can create your own declaration for yourself. So this is an example of how you can use a previous initiative to base your own initiative also off of. You can use the legal language. You can get in contact with the people who initiated that, which would be the Earth Law Center, International Rivers. You can get in contact with these organizations to help you. You can also see how they have structured the language within it, what sort of words, what sort of legal systems have been successful to help you identify ways to put your own forward. And yeah, this is really helpful as well when you're trying to identify very specific initiatives. If you have something in mind, or specific subtype of initiatives in mind, the toolkit and its filters are a great way to identify those quickly. So yeah, I think at this point, I'm happy to take some questions from people if there are any. Otherwise, I can move on to some questions that Tosana proposed earlier. So please, if you have any, go ahead. I will stop sharing my screen.
Kat.
Hi, Kits, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I guess like a question that running through like starting your own initiative, how to like would you be able to use other declarations or kind of initiatives in support of creating a new one, or what does that look like in terms of like in a research paper, do you direct people to these initiatives that are on the Jurisprudence Monitor, or is it not that kind of pivot or kind of like, reference for students or for anyone trying to start an initiative?
Yeah, great question. So if you are starting an initiative, one of the best ways to have something be successful is precedent with legal initiatives. So there are part of law and part of legal frameworks are the legal precedents that have already been established. And so demonstrating the strength of this movement, showing how many initiatives have been successful already or how many have been proposed already. Simply the force behind it and the motivation and encouragement behind all of these initiatives help when new ones are proposed. And so one of the reasons actually that we include a category in the monitor called soft law is that it's really important to show these, while not maybe explicitly legal with like legal strength initiatives like the universal declarations. It's really important to show that there is so much support from the public and from NGOs and from like quasi-governmental actors behind these things. So yes, if you are writing a research paper, for example, being able to pinpoint back to all of these initiatives that even if they aren't successful, simply showing that there's a lot of strength in numbers, that there's a lot of motivation, all of that helps propel the movement forward. And when you're starting your own initiative, having this as an underpinning for it, it's always hard to get the first one off the ground, right? But that's why we see in these graphs this like exponential curve.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. I have two questions. I guess my first question is kind of related to the one just now. So I used to volunteer at this organization that tries to include non-human life in decision making. And I was wondering if, yeah, initiatives like this are also considered into the monitor or yeah, represented in some way. And the second question I have is that I graduated recently, specializing in GIS, and looking at your website, seeing how it's displayed on a world map. This topic is very interesting to me, and I would like to know if there's any opportunities to get involved.
Yes. Okay. First question is that there are absolutely these types of initiatives in there. I would say there's two kinds. There's local laws and declarations. They're often called motions or resolutions, but they're local level laws that have the force of basically intention setting by city councils, municipal councils that state that they would like to incorporate the benefit, the well-being of nature into their decision-making and policies moving forward. And there's quite a few of them. An example would be most recently, there's an initiative in the Netherlands by a municipal council, and they are looking to encourage the city council moving forward to consider the well-being of nature in all of its policies and decision-making. That's pretty common. The second, which is really interesting, and it's beginning to happen a little more, and I'm hearing more talk about it, is that companies and nonprofits are putting nature or maybe it's all nature, maybe it's future generations, maybe it's a specific species. They're putting these entities as like board members necessarily, or they're giving them literal seats at the table. So there's a company in the UK who just put nature on its board of directors. And so nature is represented by a person who speaks for nature in all of the board meetings, all of the decision-making processes for that company. So it's kind of akin to personhood in a way, but it's specifically done in this really unique, interesting way that involves organizations and companies rather than, it's more like a policy. It's not necessarily a law. And I think that's really interesting, and it's starting to happen more and more. So there's a couple companies in the UK that have done this, and those are in the monitor. And there's an NGO in the Netherlands that has done that as well. They put a porpoise, an actual porpoise who has a name. It lives in the North Sea. It is on their board, and it is represented by a person a conservationist who speaks for the porpoise and marine life in their decision-making and policies. So yes, we definitely account for those in the monitor, and they're really interesting ways that have all of these examples have happened in the last couple years. Oh, and then your second question. Yes, there are certainly ways to get involved. So we welcome any interest in the monitor. We have internships that happen a few times a year. We have some research internships, and we have some communications internships. And if you're interested in getting involved, I welcome emails and chatting about it further. I'm here to support anyone who has research interests or ideas for projects. And yes, we rely on help and collaboration, so it's always more than welcome.
Any more questions? Thank you so much, Kat, for that demo. I also learned many new things. So I prepared some, more technical questions maybe while I was looking through the monitor that came up. So we will discuss those and hope it will be useful for others as well. The first question is that it seems like from 2023, the development of ecological law stagnates a little bit, and I was wondering why.
Yes. So I'm going to show on the monitor, there's maybe I'll share my screen quickly. On the monitor, you can see down at the bottom that this map here, or this chart here, tracks the legal provisions that have happened. There were some back before the 90s, but really everything took off around 2008, and you can see this exponential growth. But in 2023, you can see here that it looks like it has tapered off. And we don't know why things like this happen. The monitor tracks things and it identifies things, but it can't always answer the why component of it. And that is okay, because the point of the monitor is to identify trends, identify questions, and then allow you to investigate these things further. So that's a really good question that maybe will be answered by research, more in-depth research soon. However, one reason that this may be happening is that the monitor relies on self-reporting, and it also relies on extensive research done by myself and colleagues around the world. And oftentimes that means that you do not have, you're not able to know about initiatives as soon as they happen. Sometimes I hear of something immediately, but not always. And typically what happens is we'll hear about something months past. We'll hear about it from last year, or sometimes depending on the type of initiative, it'll be a couple years ago. And so what happens is I often will put in initiatives from 2023 today, or even 2022. And sometimes we'll find something that was missed from years ago that never was identified. And this is really common for local level initiatives that get less publicity. They have a smaller public reach, so we don't hear about them immediately. And as this is also true for Indigenous-led initiatives, these take deeper research and more partnership building to identify them. And they often come in the forms of declarations that are expressions of their community, and they're not always put forth in the public sphere. And a lot of times they're not available. They're not, it is not allowed to be disseminated publicly for protection of Indigenous knowledge. And so it will take time, and it takes resources to identify those. And we also have to figure out how to appropriately share this information, and if it's allowed, get consent and things like this. So for this reason, I would suspect that the initiatives starting in 2023 are less comprehensive than what we have before then. And so the monitor's constantly growing, it's evolving. And if you know of initiatives, if you ever see something that's absent, please let us know and report it so that we can make sure that this is complete and that we're accurately accounting for everything that's happening around the world.
That makes total sense. Thank you so much. So if you read about an initiative, you can't include it because it has to be self-reported. So you have to speak to the initiative taker somehow.
Well, we rely on self-reporting to learn about many initiatives because the movement is so large, it's so global that it's almost impossible now to comprehensively account for everything that's happening by one person. It's too large and too active, so we need people to report initiatives to us. It helps us make sure that we're documenting everything, but we don't need it to be self-reported to include it. If we learn of something, we will put it in there as long as there is a document, some form of legal document that we can include. So we do need the draft, we do need the document that's been submitted, whatever it is that the initiative is based on, to be able to include it in the monitor.
I see. Okay. I hope there's many more to come. And which legal provision would you say has proven most effective in protecting the rights of nature? Maybe it's also not something you can directly deduce from the monitor based on your previous answer.
Yeah, well, I think that's really the key question on everyone's mind, like which framework should we be pursuing? And there's some debate about this, but overall, initiatives that are at the national level are the most effective. So anything that is a constitutional initiative or a statutory law. Statutory is language that we use in the Western legal system, and it basically means a national level law that is initiated by a legislative body. So it has a lot of legal force. When a constitutional amendment is passed, when a statutory law is initiated, it sort of supersedes everything, and that's really powerful. When these have been initiated, it allows lots of other follow-up actions to happen. It has a lot of accountability. So when Ecuador, for example, put the rights of nature in their constitution, it allowed for numerous court cases to happen after the fact, where people are now bringing lawsuits and they're getting legal protections for all sorts of ecological entities, all sorts of ecosystems around the country. So those are definitely the most powerful. And it's really exciting to see these constitutional initiatives happening around the world. So Ecuador was the first, but we have initiatives coming in Ireland and Aruba at the moment. We have Mexico passing numerous initiatives at various state levels. So that's always really exciting to see these developments. The next, I would say, are indigenous laws, and these are also similar sort of legislation that is passed by an indigenous governing body. And so these have the same legal force as a statutory law, but of course they exist within an indigenous legal system within an indigenous nation. And the reason that those are less impactful is because they commonly are at odds with the Western legal system in the geographic area that they share. So if there is an indigenous law passed by a tribe in the United States, it is often at odds with the law of the United States. And so you see court cases happening, which you see with the rights of wild rice in Minnesota. And so those can be very effective, but they can also be contentious because they come at odds with less forward-thinking laws in the Western states. Then court cases have also proven to be really effective. There are many in Colombia and India and many places around the world that have legal precedents set at the Supreme Court level. Most of Colombia's rights of rivers initiatives have happened because the Supreme Court established rights for various rivers, for the Amazon rainforest, India as well. And so court cases tend to be really effective, especially if they happen at the national Supreme Court, Constitutional Court level. And then, we have sort of a decreasing level of authority from there, which are policies and local levels. And this is simply because of the structure of the state system. If you have a local law, that's wonderful, but you always have to contend with the federal level, the national level above it. You have to contend with your neighboring communities or your neighboring states, municipalities. And finally, the least effective at protecting nature's rights would be this sort of intention setting legal provisions, which are declarations, international documents, soft laws, citizen tribunals. These are really important to demonstrate the attitude and the intention of the public, but they don't have the legal force that a constitution or a national law does. So they're important and they help move the movement forward, but they're not going to protect the river, protect the forest, protect nature in the same way that a constitutional amendment would.
Thank you so much for that very elaborate answer. Going a bit further into the different concepts that exist in the monitor, I was wondering, like, how do you relate legal personhood with rights of nature?
Yes, that's a good question. So Monitor has an interesting methodology. On the Monitor, you can access underneath the tracker drop-down menu, there is a code book, and that explains all of the legal provisions, all of the types of jurisprudence, all of the things that we categorize in the monitor. So if you ever have questions, you can always look at that. And you're right, personhood is a rights of nature legal instrument. The reason that we differentiate them is because we want to be clear that personhood is not, or that rights of nature initiatives are not always personhood initiatives, that these two things are not inherently the same. And that's really important for a few reasons. One is that that many indigenous models, they are not ontologically aligned with personhood, with these rights-based framings. So it's important to note that while personhood has a rights-based framing, it's not the only way you can articulate and codify or articulate the rights of nature, the rights of something. And personhood is also something that's of interest to a lot of people, to researchers, to lawyers. And so we also want to have an easy system of delineating them and identifying them for people to go through the monitor and find them. And the same is true for animal rights, for example. That's also a rights-based framing, but we want to sort of pull those away so that people can look through the monitor and find them easily if that's what's of interest to them. So when you go into the monitor, you might find an initiative that is labeled as personhood and rights of nature and an indigenous model. They're not necessarily only one, they can be multiple, but you might just find one that says rights of nature alone. So there are many categories, there are many options, and the reason we do it that way is to allow people to search and filter and explore things that are of interest to them, and it allows us to create these charts and graphs and depict the movement in various ways.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Another thing I noticed was that you also have a function in the market to see which initiatives are rejected. And I thought that personhood and animal jurisprudence are more rejected than, for example, governance and indigenous ones. And yeah, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is a really good question. And this is kind of getting into the area of speculation. So I can offer my theories and insights, but I can't answer this for certain. But based on my experience with the monitor, what I think could be happening is that these eco-governance initiatives, they are more inherently compatible with the Western legal governance frameworks that exist right now. So an example of eco-governance would be ecocide law. And it's an idea that fits in the structure that already exists pretty well. And so while it's novel and it's important, it fits in the system of changing the penal code to include ecocide. You know, we have genocide, we have these ideas that are already they kind of work together. And so while it's really important and exciting if ecocide law is adopted, it inherently works a little more smoothly within the system. However, personhood, environmental personhood, and animal rights initiatives, adopting these really requires a paradigm shift in thinking. It really upheaves the system. And so adopting something that gives an animal personhood, giving a forest personhood, that sets a very large new precedent. And so my theory would be that doing so is harder to achieve and less people are less willing to take that step. And so oftentimes court cases on animal rights and personhood are struck down. So maybe maybe an initiative was successful, and then it will be brought to court and a judge will strike it down. And so it will end up being rejected, even if the community, the local governance, the state initially approved it. A court will say, actually, that's a little step too far. We're going to strike that down, and it will get rejected. Indigenous models, on the other hand, are initiatives that exist. They're Indigenous led, or they're co-developed by a group that self-identifies as Indigenous. And these are usually expressed through the governing body of an Indigenous nation, or through some other framework. And they're not expressions within the legal systems of the Westphalian state, which means that they are more inherently aligned with the theoretical framings, and they're therefore more successful. So we recognize Indigenous sovereignty, and we include initiatives by Indigenous people, even if their authority or sovereignty isn't recognized by governments that are part of the Westphalian state. And so under customary law and the International Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, any entity that identifies as Indigenous peoples is presumed to have the right to self-determination and to execute their own legal initiatives. And therefore, they are inherently more successful, and they are more aligned with the worldviews and the ecocentric framings that these initiatives are putting forward. So for that reason, they're often more successful.
I think this is really interesting, and it testifies to diversity within the rights of nature movement, that there's still so many different types of eco-jurisprudence, and also the importance of how much it fits with the political language, sort of. So I think that's really interesting. And the last question is, what does it mean to have traditional ecological knowledge?
Yes. Yeah, so there's a category called local ecological knowledge, and this is meant to identify an initiative that is led by a non-Indigenous community, but that applies traditional ecological knowledge and expresses a ecocentric relationality and recognition with nature. And that's because there are many groups and communities, especially in Asia and in Africa, that do not necessarily identify as Indigenous communities. And so we want to delineate these two things. And we want to make sure that we're representing the way that people identify themselves appropriately and correctly. And so if the initiative has many similar underpinnings of these, of like a unique and special relationship with nature and with the area that the initiative is about, then we want to capture that sort of theoretical framing in a special way, and also simultaneously point out that this is not an Indigenous identifying group or community. And so therefore we've created this local ecological knowledge category to capture that.
Thank you. It was very informative and inspiring. If any more questions have come up for other people, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we can end it here.
I just want to encourage anyone to explore the monitor, to reach out to me, and also if you want to get involved let me know. You are welcome to send an email. There's contact information on the monitor. And please, please let us know if you know of anything happening around the world that needs to be included in the monitor, as well as if there are ever any errors. It's a large data set and that can happen as well. Sometimes they're large errors and sometimes they're small, but we want to make sure it's as accurate as possible. So please don't hesitate to let us know.